So you know what genuinely annoys me about modern football discourse? We spend years talking about complete strikers, elite finishers, big game players, and yet somehow one of the greatest goal scorers of the 21st century gets treated like a side character in football history. Just look at the numbers for a second. Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, Lewandowski, Ibrahimović, Suárez, the names everyone instantly remembers. Then somewhere buried in the conversation is Edin Džeko, quietly sitting near the very top of the century's scoring charts as if it's some statistical mistake. But it isn't. And the deeper you look into it, the crazier it becomes. Because unlike most of the strikers around him, Džeko was never built around penalties, media attention, or systems designed entirely to feed him goals. Across his entire career, he barely took penalties at all. 18. That's it. Meanwhile, other elite forwards were adding double digits every single season from the spot. Remove penalties from the equation, and suddenly Džeko jumps even higher up the rankings, right beside some of the most protected and celebrated forwards football has ever seen. Which immediately raises the question, how did a player this productive become so underrated? And honestly, the answer starts long before football. Before the goals, before Wolfsburg, before Manchester City, before Roma, before any of that, there was Sarajevo. Not the beautiful city tourists know today, but Sarajevo during the Bosnian War. One of the darkest periods Europe has seen in modern history. Džeko grew up during the siege of Sarajevo, where the city was effectively trapped for years under constant bombardment. Imagine trying to live a normal childhood, while shells are falling from the sky, and snipers are positioned around your city. Imagine football being the only thing that makes the world feel normal for even 10 minutes. That was Džeko's reality. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. Families were packed into tiny apartments just trying to survive another night. And yet through all of it, football never disappeared from his life. In fact, it almost feels impossible now to imagine that one of the greatest strikers of his generation was once just a skinny kid kicking a ball through ruined streets while bombs exploded nearby. And the stories from that period genuinely sound unreal. At one point, his family home was destroyed during the conflict, forcing multiple relatives into an overcrowded apartment just to survive. Then there's the story Džeko himself has talked about before, where his mother suddenly dragged him inside because she had a terrible feeling while he was playing outside. Moments later, an explosion hit the exact area where he had been standing. Think about that for a second. Football history could have lost Edin Džeko before his career had even begun. And maybe that's part of what shaped him later on. Because when you survive something like that as a child, pressure inside a football stadium probably doesn't feel quite the same anymore. Once the war finally ended, Sarajevo was barely recognizable. Large parts of the city were destroyed, infrastructure collapsed, stadiums ruined. But for Džeko's father, football represented normality returning. The moment it became possible again, he pushed Edin into academy football. Training sessions weren't glamorous either. There were no elite facilities, no polished academies, no perfect pitches. Players traveled across damaged parts of the city just to train in borrowed spaces, because proper football infrastructure barely existed anymore. But for Džeko, none of that mattered. For the first time in years, football no longer existed beside fear. It became freedom. The strange thing, though, is that even then, almost nobody saw greatness in him. Today, people look back at Džeko and assume he must have been this obvious wonder kid because of how successful he became. But the reality was almost the complete opposite. At 17, he was tall, awkward, physically underdeveloped, and still being used as a midfielder rather than a striker. Fans actually mocked him for how clumsy he looked on the ball. They nicknamed him the wooden pole, basically calling him stiff and useless. And honestly, if you only watched those early years, you might have believed them. He didn't explode past defenders. He didn't dribble through entire teams. He wasn't technically flashy. He looked raw, unpolished, almost too slick for top-level football. But one man saw something nobody else did. Czech coach Gigi Plíšek became obsessed with the idea that Džeko was being completely misunderstood. While everyone else focused on what he couldn't do, Plíšek focused on what he could become. So when he returned to the Czech Republic, he pushed for Džeko to join him so aggressively that people about the team thought it was ridiculous. Transfer fee insights to the consistently. Not lucky goals either. Composed finishes, clever makes this even crazier as how perception properly. You either recognize it immediately, or you miss it entirely. Thankfully for Wolfsburg, they recognized it just in time. And although Magath himself reportedly barely knew anything about Džeko initially,